There you go.
Okay. Oh, Iri, good to have you join us from Netherlands and from all of our audience as we continue this conversation with uh, Jiri on digital father. Uh, I like us to look at it from the point where we're bringing the perspectives of other regions into it. But before we go deeper, Yuri, I want you to let the people meet you. Just talk to us about what you do, how you began your work engaging positive masculinity, and why this topic is just very important to you.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here. My name is Jiri Rakosnik. I'm the founder of Few Good Men. We are bringing men back to their power and strength. We're operating outside of Amsterdam, across whole Europe and also Costa Rica. I have 20 years of corporate marketing executive roles behind me. My nickname was Midwife because I was always sent to transform teams, brands, and companies until I realized one day it was time to transform myself. So I basically realized that while I'm actually winning on paper, I was doing quite well. Deep inside, there was something that told me that something is wrong. And I felt like what got me here to that point is not going to basically get me ahead. And I started to realize patterns that my relationships were not basically stable. I started to see that I would emotionally withdraw when the stress was coming up. I started to see that I was pleasing too much people. And there were different things that somehow took my energy and I didn't know what to do with it. So at some point I left. I left my corporate career. And then at that point, my world basically crashed. At that point, I realized how much my identity was tied to the external factors, and that basically I was living a life. I was living a life that was not mine. So that was quite a hard half a year for me. And that took me to Costa Rica, where basically I met a couple of people, including my today very good friend, the shaman, who initiated me into who I really was. He helped me to see, what kind of mask I was wearing, what kind of old contract I was fulfilling. And we removed that and slowly moved into who I really was. And he also showed me basically how to really embrace both, being generous and kind, but also a very wild person, which I was missing in my life as well. So it was a beautiful journey, and I went through it, and that was maybe 7 years ago. And then I realized, wow, I wish this more men could experience because it basically filled me with a profound inner peace, like a level of groundedness that is difficult to describe, but that always noise that was there, the nervousness that was there, suddenly disappeared. And people would come to me and say, "Hey, what did you do? Like, what happened?" And people instantly see that on you. So then I would start to share my story, and I got more encouragement to start doing something about it. So yeah, I formed a group of people, and then we slowly start leaning into this, and it lead all the way to here. And yeah, it just gives me an immense sense of pleasure and fulfillment.
Wow, what a transformation. That's the journey to personal transformation, and I'm super glad you're sharing that. Jerry, it's great to have you join us in this growing global conversation. At BMEN, that's Boys Mentoring Advocacy Network, we've been exploring what I called the digital father. This idea that boys are increasingly turning to algorithms, platforms, and AI system for guidance instead of fathers and mentors. This is not just a technological shift, it is a developmental shift. And I'm really interested in exploring this from your perspective, especially through your work with positive masculinity. You are the forefront of positive masculinity movement in the Netherlands. And in our work with B-Man, we have identified the digital father as the algorithm surrogate raising this generation. How are you seeing this play out in the European context? Is the digital script for boys in Netherlands different from what we are seeing globally?
Well, the algorithm doesn't respect borders, so that definitely is the same case here. But what I can see in Amsterdam and in Europe in general is that about 61% of men, while they're claiming they're successful and doing really well, they're also saying that they feel completely ungrounded. What that means is basically they themselves do not know too much who they are. And they themselves have a bit of a difficulty of being a hero and role models for themselves. And therefore, it's difficult to be there for their own boys. So while well-meaning, the most important thing is basically for the guys to actually start working on themselves. Because if we first don't hear ourselves, we have nothing to offer. So that's where we're coming in as few good men. And what I see what I see basically playing out in the people who come here, the change and the support that they're getting from even their young boys to join
Yeah,
our group is fantastic. The boys are actually proud, and suddenly they see that a dad can create an environment at home that is without self judgment, very safe, where also they inspire the boys not to perform and they can open up and together they can finally sit down and have a good conversation. So, in my mind, this is basically where we are stepping in, and this is how to address the digital father as well. Because there is a gap, there is a void, like you were saying also in your paper, and it basically is up to each of us how we're going to fill that void.
yeah. Oh, that was powerful. I like the part where you say algorithm does not respect borders. That was very, very powerful, Yuri. And it suggests this is not isolated. It means it's systemic. So, from your vantage point, what version of masculinity do you see algorithm amplifying most? And what concerns you about this?
I think, well, let's first address the version of masculinity that I like. So the other day I was listening to a Sheldon master who was basically saying if you're about to make a decision and you're not quite sure whether a decision is good or bad, consider what the result of that decision is going to be. Is it going to create a lightness or is it going to create more darkness and constriction? And I fundamentally believe that the masculinity and the role of masculinity is to elevate. So to elevate the spirits, elevate the relationship, elevate the work. So that basically for me, that is where we're coming, where we're going to. That is what we are trying to aim for with Few Good Men. The algorithm, on the other hand, what it rewards is, of course, let's say engagement. The engagement is being driven by reactivity. And that is the fundamental issue that we are also practicing here with the men, not just the boys, is how not to be reactive, because that is the fundamental issue of all of this. And you can only not be reactive when you fully know yourself. If you are aware of what's happening inside you, what is driving that reactivity in you, and then only you can let go. So, in my mind, that is the work that we're doing. When it comes to boys, the biggest concern is that what it tells them is basically that the strength lies in being loud, in being controlling, in being fairly reactive. And that is not real strength. That is basically just a small boy throwing a tantrum online. And that will never work in a real life if you want to build something fundamentally long lasting. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Yuri. You said it well. It's just like a small boy throwing tantrum online. and that's just being unduly loud. Let's go deeper into influence because that seems to be where the real shift is happening. Your organization, Feel Good Men Co., emphasizes the importance of quality role models. In a world where the digital fodder is available 24/7, while human mentors are often intermittent, how do you make the voice of a feel good man loud more attractive than the voice of thousands of thousands of algorithms?
I think therein lies a beautiful paradox. What we're trying to do is not to be louder. I am a firm believer that the most magnetic person in the room is the one who possess a very grounded calmness, because that person stands out. So also when it comes to our boys, the most fundamental thing is to be able to listen, to be able to be there for them, to be able to lean in and be connected in whatever is happening in your life. And it doesn't just to be, it doesn't have to be just with your boys. It's also in your relationships, in the teams at work. The importance of staying connected when
Yeah,
the things are bad, when the tension arises. That is the fundamental test of a grounded man and an integrated man. So I feel for us, we're not trying to be louder. We're trying to create as many role models who are not just present for the boys, but they're also creating positive environment at work. And they can basically spread that energy because people will be curious. People will come to you and say, how are you doing this that you don't get angry about
that's
this?
true. Yeah, that's true. You're absolutely right. So calmness. Let's think about the digit. Do you think really, Yuri, that the digital father is pushing boys towards performing masculinity rather than developing it? And how does that show up later in men?
Yeah, 100%. 100% it's about performing. And I can see it 20 years later when working with their fathers, because they are actually performing as well. The fact that the 61% of people who are successful who claim they're ungrounded, that they feel ungrounded, means that they are essentially living life that is not theirs. And they are simply performing. And it brings us to the original wound of boys, which is disconnection. So if we generalize completely and if we really focus on the core wound where every single one of us
Yeah,
is coming from, it's called disconnection. And it happens somewhere between 3 and 5 years old when we are told that suddenly the sensitive people who are being themselves, who are fairly relational, cannot be themselves because it's not appreciated, because it's either being mocked or being seen as weak. So therefore, suddenly you stop being yourself and you need to start realizing, okay, so you need to be very aware of your environment. What kind of behavior does it actually then support? What and reward? And you start slowly performing. You start slowly becoming that person that people will clap for. So that's basically where we're coming from. And that means that we're partially disconnected from our heart because those are the emotions, the empathy, the relational capability. And on the other hand, unfortunately, what it also means that because of the lack of proper role models, we're not
yeah,
really initiated into our male power. So we're also told by our mothers, by our female teachers, by society in general, that we cannot be too wild. So on one hand, you're losing your sensitivity. On the other hand, you're losing your essential power. And then you're there. Now what do I do? I need to start perform. I need to start putting on the mask, the heavy armor. And that is
mm,
basically the work that we're doing with men. That we're trying to understand what sort of armor did you put on over the years that actually is suffocating you, that took the power away from you. And now you suddenly start to realize anywhere between 30 and 40 years old that the energy is running out because you are not connected to your essential power. So that is where we're stepping in and we're coming back. Okay, let's remove it. Let's see what's underneath. Let's take that away so you can come back to who you are and you don't perform. And if you go through that as a father, you are able to show that to your son and create the environment of safety for your son so that he finally
Mm.
feels he doesn't have to perform.
I like that one. The environment of psychological safety
Yeah,
for yours.
indeed.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Jerry. That brings us to something deeper. What is happening internally for boys? The Netherlands is known for its progressive approach to socio-emotional health. How does the concept of relational resistance, I mean, the ability to stay connected to oneself and others, aligning with your coaching and advocacy for men and boys?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. Staying, and we've covered it partially, staying in and being connected when the thing goes down
Yeah.
is the fundamental skill. Now, how do you do that? You can only do that if you can manage your own nervous system. And
Yeah.
that leads you again back to self-awareness, to the ability to understand what's happening inside and having the right tools to avoid your nervous system being fried. Because if you're running on anxiety or if you're running on, the fear that I'm not good enough, which is, of course, what the digital father and the whole internet is feeding you at the
Yeah.
end of the day, then
Yeah.
you are constantly operating from the fight and flight stress. So then it's a bit difficult. And we tend to withdraw, we tend to numb ourselves with drugs and alcohol, and just simply run away from things.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
to stay and have that relational resistance, one must simply first manage himself, know himself, understand why he's reacting, why he's basically what's driving his reaction, and what are the emotions that are happening inside and how to manage them. So training that somatically is what we do through breath work, through body work, through ability to listen and freely express yourself, and also to learn actually the right vocabulary for it. That helps a lot. And that basically brings you to a place where you can fully lean in and be there when you're needed.
Wow. You, you gave a very precise answer to that. And it's true, you know. Uh, the next question I want to really kind of explore is the mask of performance. We've discussed how digital platforms reward performance over presence. For the boys you work with, how does this digital mask complicate their transition into authentic manhood or adulthood? How do we help them strip away the pixel to find the person?
Yeah. We do work with men and mostly their fathers, so not the boys themselves, but it is similar because men these days, even the younger ones, are obsessed with the mask, but they would call it optimizing. So
Yeah.
you would call it, of course, anything from dressing well, managing your digital mask, optimizing through sort of aura rings and God knows what. So that is very prominent thing. And what does the mask do? I think the important thing is to again come back to the original wound and to understand why do people put the mask on in the first place? And that's both young boys and the older guys as well.
In adult.
They put it
Yeah.
on because they need to survive. So the mask basically says that the biggest weakness you can do is show your vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And you have put the mask on because you needed to survive. You couldn't be yourself when you were younger. You basically were disconnected. So you started to put on the mask. So how does it prevent one to grow? Is indeed, yeah, until you are able to take it off, you will not grow. To be able to take it off, you need a safe environment. You need a place where people will not judge you, where they will accept you for who you are. And that is also the environment that we're providing here with Few Good Men. And that I assume is also the environment that is being provided when there's, for example, the weekend retreats for dad and son, uh, where people help young men to also remove the mask already early on.
Yeah. So if we accept the digital father is already shaping boys, the question becomes, what do we do about it? And if the digital father is already shaping boys globally, what responsibility do men today have to step back into mentorship and reclaim that role?
I would revert to my original first answer of the first question. In order to help anybody else, we first need to heal ourselves.
Yeah,
So it's absolutely fundamental that the men are able to first understand themselves, heal themselves, be there for themselves. And when they are integrated fully, they can be there for the boys and create an environment where the boys can actually flourish. I don't think the boys are waiting for another lecture, but what they really want is someone who can be with them at that
exactly.
particular moment, physically fully connected.
Yeah, I think that takes me to also explore the type of fatherhood legacies or inheritance we both at least receive growing up as a man, you know.
Yeah.
There are a lot of men right now. When it comes to the legacy of fatherhood or fathering, some experience wounded fathers growing up. Some also experience what I call absent fathers,
Mhm.
you know, and some also experience what I call the good father, but there is a kind of imbalance or not too complete in it. How does it all play out when it comes to you being a father? You talk about this father wound connecting to why boys now goes or men go into the digital father space because the inheritance they got while growing up was not what they would like to kind of maybe deploy or to the other men around them. So how do you help such a man that maybe has an inheritance of a father wound, absent fathers, or the good father stuff, which is not too complete?
Yeah, it's a um I would say it's a bit of a it's a generational thing as well, right? So
Absolutely.
I was reading an article where 1/3 of Gen Z men believes that a wife should listen and obey her husband out of nowhere. Out of
Yeah.
the Gen Z who are like, fluffy people, suddenly like, oh, the guys believe that actually the women should listen. So where does that come from? And it's really a complicated issue that basically has been running through generations. Of course, indeed, there's in general lack of role models. There's more and more guys who are growing up without dads, but there's also
Yeah.
physically because the dads are simply not there. But also there
Yeah.
are dads who are there, but not are they are not emotionally available. So that's what we've discussed
That's what
before.
I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they
It-
simply they haven't gone through their own initiation, therefore they have nothing to teach their boys. And then there's the whole system, which
yeah.
rewards, of course, there's mothers, so they require more the good boys, the wildness you guys can keep for yourselves, and we just need good boys. Then you have the female teachers, usually at a lower level of or at a younger level of education. And then you have also the general society expectation, basically saying you, if you're going to be a good man, if you're going to take care of everybody, if you're going to make a lot of money, you'll have a beautiful wife, wonderful life, and you'll be super happy. So you're
Yeah.
trying to follow this,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work. And now what you see is
Hmm.
that the young boys are also seeing that. The young boys are seeing that, wow, okay, but my dad was all of that I was told that I needed to be. And he's either divorced, depressed, or he's not too happy, as essentially. So how am I going to do this? And
Absolutely.
then, of course, you cannot talk to him. You don't have any other role models. So, but you still need the answers because you're curious and you are growing. So then you go to the digital
Yeah.
father. So indeed, so that is more or less what's been playing out. So it's definitely a systemic issue.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I just want us to have a little background into why this seems to be is rising now. The digital father is on the rising, look, it's like you said, this is systemic, and we need to respond. We
Mm,
need to respond as we prepare for the Boys Future Boys Challenge Global Summits and the 2026 Global Communique. What is one human OS? That's the internal compass that we need to upgrade and believe every mentor must provide for the boys today to help them navigate this digital vacuum.
The one upgrade I would highlight is heart-led simplicity. And it is exactly what we're working on with men over here as well. It's basically to teach them that no algorithm, no internet wisdom is stronger than their own internal compass. So their body and their heart has already so much intelligence, and that basically they carry everything they need to know, and it's much more powerful than whatever's out there available with the algorithm. So it's basically the self-trust and self-worth, and understanding that deep inside you have a mechanism that already knows what you need, who you need to be, and what you need to become. So I think that's the most fundamental thing for me.
There's one thing you want parents, educators, and men around the world to understand about the digital father right now. What will it be?
I would say, yeah, the digital father actually is not an enemy. It's a symptom, right? So the whole point is not to try to fight the internet, but it's more, again, having from my perspective, what I do, the cure actually lies in having more mature men being available to men.
Thank you, Jerry. It has been incredibly to be with you on this conversation. What is clear is that this is not just about technology, like you said. It's about presence, responsibility, and the future of how boys become men. I say this all the time. The algorithm can give answers. Only men and mentors
Mm.
can give future and directions to our young boys. Thank you for adding your voice to this global conversation. And I appreciate it very much, Jerry. Thank you
And
so much.
thank you, Ola, and thank you for doing your part. It's super important.